Okay, hi everybody. I'm Bob Weathers here with your Vitality Project with my beloved colleague in arms, Angela MacLeod.
Hi, Bob. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you with me again and us being together here, sharing with others some ideas that we've been exploring. I think, the last few weeks in the Vitality Project, our daily posts, we've been talking about these two different parts of our psyches. We talk about the depressor, and that's kind of shorthand for the part of ourselves that is very critical of ourselves. It might be associated for us with previous conversations about shame. It looks at us as not being enough, maybe somehow being defective or broken. There's all kinds of things that go with this, and we're just calling it for shorthand the depressor. And we've also introduced the idea that in the presence of the depressor, not infrequently, there's some part of us that comes in that wants to get that depressor out of the way and to feel better, because the depressor makes us feel miserable. We've been calling that part of us that is activated in the presence of the depressor, we've been calling it the fixer. And in the latest post, we've been talking about how that there can sometimes be a cycle between the depressor and the fixer, where I get attacked or undermined from inside by this negative self-talk. We've talked about negative storylines. And then in will come the fixer with its ideas of what would make this all better. And it can lead me to activities or behaviors. They're all well-meaning. And when they work, it's fine, but sometimes they don't work. And we're looking at that cycle right now, realizing that sometimes when the fixer is unsuccessful, the depressor will get activated and come in and actually pour more fuel on the fire, so to speak. So I just wanted to talk about this. It's kind of counterintuitive. And we're going to continue to flesh it out over the next several posts. I was working on this later today, and we'll have posts over the weekend of looking at this, including what we can do about it. I'd like just to deliberate on any part of this that touches you, Angela, in your own experience, both personally as well as in the work that you do, working with individuals and groups. And let's just see where we go with it. So the topic is how we can name our own depressor-fixer cycle or cycles. And I'm wide open to where we go with that. So can I invite you for any of your own reflections?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, it took me a little while to get used to the languaging, the terms. But I could see parallels with other work I do within myself and other modalities, so that it was very familiar actually to plug into these exercises that you've given to us. That I really love how you break it down into small pieces that that are pretty easy to, and if you really just sit down with it, it's not that hard to use these processes and exercises.
Thank you.
Yeah, what stood out for me, I picked something that's current for me to kind of plug into this formula, and it has to do with bookkeeping, financial bookkeeping. I'm in a new situation in my life, I'm just going to give a little context. I'm in a radically new situation where I'm going through divorce, and in the marriage, which has been a long marriage, my husband was just more proficient with math and bookkeeping. So I would just kind of plug in and do some of the tasks, but he kind of knew the whole bigger picture. And that worked for us pretty well. Now that I'm on my own, I'm aware that I need to figure out my own system with bookkeeping. And in comes the depressor for me around that. And it comes up in different ways. Like, I hate this. I don't want to do it. I'm no good at it. I don't like math. So I can, get really caught into my own beliefs about myself and the reality. And then fear was in there too, because this is something I need to have handled better in my life. It's just going to get worse if I put it off and procrastinate. The fixer comes in kind of as in kind of two different ways. One is, first, this was a little bit hard for me to recognize, but one is really as the procrastinator. So the depressor is scared. I don't want to do this. And the fixer says, oh, you don't have to do it right now. Yeah. And that's really about, I just don't want to feel those feelings. And I'm not sure where to go. I'm not sure how to get my own financial program on board here. But then the fixer also can come in with lots of ideas, and it can also like crack the whip. Like you better sit down and start, working on your system, those kind of thoughts. And then they can kind of go back and forth at each other. I don't want to, I hate it. And as I was using your model here, there were two things that stood out for me. One was that the fixer is actually coming from the same brain mode as the depressor. and I often don't get good results when I try to find a solution from the same part of my brain or my nervous system that had the problem to begin with. So that was a good, reminder, it's going to turn into this vicious cycle. With elements of, okay, well, this is where the addictive urge can come in, or the craving, because it is both the depressor and the fixer are very uncomfortable. Yeah. Sometimes the fixer helps me get things done that I don't really want to do. So I believe that the fixer is, that's the way to go, is to go with the fixer, but it's very stressful, and to be driven by stress is very tiring and unpleasant and limited. And that's where my urges to use or escape can come in.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all that you've shared. The rooting it in your personal experience makes it come alive. Really appreciate that, Angela, because it's your story, it's your current experience. And so I appreciate your vulnerability. And I'm also really grateful because I think it fleshes it out. As you know, those terms, for example, the depressor and the fixer, those aren't my own terms. And so I'm working with a model. It's referred to as mind-body bridging. And I know you're fully aware of it. For anybody who's interested, this is a model that's been developed in a book by Stanley Block and 𝗙𝗊𝗄𝗧. And it's simply called the Mindbody Workbook for Addiction. Yeah. And Guy and I are working right now together on this model to create a revised edition of the initial workbook. It came out several years ago, and I'm trying to find my way with it. So some of the language I use, I have to use my own words. So for example, when I talk about red alert brain in our posts or resting brain, those are my own terms. I prefer them to some of the terms that were used in the initial edition of the book. I've yet to see whether Guy is going to be okay with that. But some of these terms, like the depressor and the fixer, and the idea of requirements and negative storylines, those are terms from mind-body bridging, which is the theoretical basis of this book. And I think they're useful only if we can anchor them in our own experience. And you've just done a fantastic job of that, Angela. Thank you. Really, really helpful. There was a thought that came up as I was listening to you. Oh, I know. You saw me when I did this sign. It's so spot on what you said. And actually, I've been working on some posts for the weekend. So the next few posts, I think early next week, are basically making this point that, Angela, I think I hear a fan or something. Is that, do you know what that is?
Not in here. I don't have it in here.
It could be in the system. That's okay.
Okay.
That's okay.
I don't think it's my side.
It just stopped. I don't know. I'll keep my eyes. Yeah, I'm not sure what it was. I just wanted to make sure people could hear you and me. Your point that the problem, one of the problems with this fixer, because it sounds like it's all good news. Who wouldn't want to fix the depressor? Yeah. Except that if it's coming from the same place, and for shorthand, we'll call it the red alert brain. If it's coming from the red alert brain, I really liked every word that you used. There's a narrowing of creativity when I'm in red alert mode. There's a limitation of options. I don't brainstorm well. And even my implementing what I brainstorm is curtailed by the fact that I'm in this kind of fight or flight emergency mode. And so ironically, my so-called fixes, if they're generated out of that same mode that the depressor specializes in, which is the red alert mode, that I'll probably be hamstrung in my so-called solutions. My solutions might actually make matters worse. And at the very least, I liked so much of what you said, at the very least, they're associated with such stress. They don't resolve the stress. So if the depressor puts me into a distressed state of mind, let's say, and body, the fixer just kind of perpetuates that. I'm running around in circles, but I'm really anxious. And even the example you gave is, well, I better get in there and come up with a good system. Well, it's not that that's a bad idea, but the state of mind that you're in won't relieve you from the distress that you were in before. And so it's possible, if we just stick with the example, that whatever system you would come up would really benefit from being more in resting brain than in red alert brain. In fact, that's an assertion that we make in the post, and I think you might that you might not disagree with me in that. So I just appreciate you, just the whole way you went through that process really gives us the whole kind of cycle, how it wraps around on itself. And also your diagnosis of the situation, which is looking at the mode of thinking, the mode of processing. When we're in that activated or triggered state, it doesn't go well for us. And then if we just add that postscript that you added, which is for those of us that are in recovery from various forms of enslavement, whether it's to substances or behaviors or attitudes, that distress that we stay in is likely going to increase. I'm wanting to adopt your word. I like it so much more than craving. Urges. I like it so much. I really do appreciate that. So whether we call it cravings or urges, is that for those of us, especially who have struggled with addictive behaviors in the past, that stress will itself incite or evoke those urges, that craving that will lead us possibly to relapse in addictive behaviors. And so we've got to break that cycle. And ironically, sometimes our fixer isn't very good at doing that. It's very counterintuitive for most people. I spent a lot of my life trying to fix things. And this is well before I got addicted to substance, trying to fix things, not realizing that I was kind of pouring gas on the fire. So really, thank you. I just feel like you very thoroughly kind of analyzed the limitations of this. It's not to say that you don't need to address your bookkeeping. It's not to say that, but it has more to do with how we go about doing that. And oftentimes we're kind of captivated by this red alert mode, and it can be literally the death of us.
Yeah, that's been a tricky hanging point for me too, about that there is a kernel of truth in there that I do need a bookkeeping system, you know? And so I think what I've been realizing or recognizing in the recent years is just what you're saying, that it's how I come to that, getting that need met. That is more important. But I've lived so much in the red alert brain without even being aware of it, that I just get right back up there into that thinking, that mode, that almost gets pissed off, you know, like, so, well, I have to have a bookkeeping system. What do you mean? You know, I have to figure this out. And that's come up a lot of times for me. And that becomes part of that looping cycle again.
I think it takes our being able to kind of look under the hood and see how these attempted solutions can actually make the problem worse. And it takes a fairly nuanced self-reflection to get at it, which is the distinction we're making. Not all of my fixes are bad. It depends on who's voicing the fix.
This reminds me of a story that is somewhat famous, that is, let's see, Rip Van Winkle. I don't know if you read that story or heard
when I was
that
a boy, I did. When I was a boy, I did.
Well, I saw it actually more in my adult life. I never heard it as a child. I saw it in the form of claymation movie format, which is really beautiful, real beautifully done. But that story sticks with me quite a bit, because here is this character who's this really sweet guy, and yet he's not very functional in the regular world. You know, he keeps messing things up, and he's really trying hard, and he ends up making one blunder after another. And finally, his response to the blunder, one after another, surprised me. It was, well, I'm going to go squirrel hunting. Okay, now I wouldn't go squirrel hunting, but the thing is he doesn't actually ever shoot a squirrel. He just gets his gun and he goes off into the woods. He basically just lets go of the big mess of the problem in his life, and he goes out into the woods and he takes a nap. And more things happen to him. Yeah, a very famous nap. And I won't go into all the details there, but what really kind of reverberates for me, he went through this incredible adventure. He woke up out of that, ending up like 50 years later or something. And he can't, you know, he's an old man, but he goes back to his village, and he has a whole different perspective. People treat him differently. He has a different way of relating to community. Now that archetype, that image for me is that all of the things that I'm trying to do to fix it in that mode that I'm in, it isn't working. Maybe it's time to go take a nap in the woods, or whatever, you know, whatever method you might have. Or you turn it over. You know, that reminds me of the 12-step program, where we turn over our problems to a higher power that we know we can't fix by our own means. And so to me, that's also like turning it over to the resting brain. You know, the brain, part of the brain that maybe I haven't been living in that mode very much, you know, so it's kind of foreign territory. But I'm starting to learn how to allow myself to be in the resting brain more and more. So back to my own story with my bookkeeping, I found out that there is actually some state support for women in business, small micro businesses that are, you know, mentors, people who can help with things. And, you know, I haven't looked into it yet, but I just found out about this yesterday. And so, you know, I could say, well, that's my higher power, or the universe is stepping in because I just let go for a little bit. And I still have work to do. So it's not letting go. It's not just going la la la, you know, I don't have to do anything with bookkeeping. But it's finding the solution from a different source, from a different brain mode, body mode. Yeah.
I really love your application. You've amplified Rip Van Winkle into complete applicability to what we're talking about. And I love the image there, is that whatever it is that will help us transition from the earlier mode, which is not working very well. And he procrastinates, he goes out to go hunting. And let's use that as a bridge, a metaphor for the bridge into another way of being. And you're in that. In fact, the non-ignoring of the needfulness for you to develop a bookkeeping system, in other words, you're not ignoring that, but moving into that kind of Rip Van Winkle different mode opens you to some really creative options. I'm even respecting the fact that it didn't drop off a tree, this organization that will provide you support. You had to have been open to exploring it, probably investigating it, and even considering it might apply to you. All of that is so much more accessible in the resting brain than in the red alert brain.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the points of whatever it is. If you're going to Rip Van Winkle it, again, it isn't shutting down your awareness. In fact, it's opening up to a different awareness. So when I'm in the red alert brain, I may not have found this source of support, because I'd have blinders on, you know, with the red alert, you know, going back and forth between my depressor and my fixer, arguing with each other. And
I thought of an analogy as I was listening to you recount the story of Rip Van Winkle, is that I not infrequently wake up in the morning with some kind of anxiety or distress going on. And I think it can be born out of dreams I've had. It can be born out of just, you and I both we have a lot of plate spinning. I know you do in your life, and you know that I do in my life and work as well. And to start off my morning then by quiet time, and particularly, and I know you relate to this, my swimming every morning,
Mm.
it really shifts the energy for me. So that's my Rip Van Winkle experience every morning. While it's not literally taking a nap, what it is it's swimming, immersing myself in water, and just the act of physicality, of being physically engaged like that. It's more often the case than not. It's not. There's no magic bullet for life, but
Yeah.
it's much more often the case than not that whatever state of mind I was in before, that let's say it was a red alert brain, has now transitioned into resting brain, and I oftentimes have some of my most creative, like problem solving inspirations will come in my drive back from the pool to my home. I mean, it's literally just opens up a whole nother channel. So it's self-reinforcing. It's like for you as a dancer, it's like you don't have to force yourself to do it. It feels so doggone good. And it's so, it bears such fruit. It bears such rich fruit, you know.
Yeah, that would be my wish for everyone, is to find the thing, whether it's swimming or playing drums or dancing or, you know, as we've talked before in other of these events, finding the thing that works for you, that allows you to have that transition into the resting brain, or gives you a break from the blinders, you know, of the depressor fixer mode, because that's where we access a different kind of solution to a lot of issues.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm glad that we're together in this, both of us very committed to cultivating our respective art forms, and we can understand art forms in a really broad way. It can include anything that you love doing that creates this kind of flow space. I'm going to start calling it a Rip Van Winkle space. Angela, I want to thank you for your time, your inspiration. I thank you. I hope both of us have good Rip Van Winkle sleeps tonight, rests tonight. Okay. Yeah,
Sounds
thanks
good.
so much for joining us. For anybody who's here for the first time, Angela will be back next Friday. We meet each Friday night and we unpack these kinds of useful nuggets. I hope you can apply these morsels tonight to your own life, and follow also our posts as they unfold, because we'll definitely, I think that in some ways you're being prophetic tonight, Angela, because many of the things you pointed to will be coming out in the posts ahead. So I'm looking forward to our continuing to kind of amplify and expand on this material together. It's always a joy. Thank you, dear one.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful evening.
You
Good
too.
night, everybody. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye, Angela. Bye-bye.
Bye.